Welcome again to 3CR Raising Our Voices. We are happy to be bringing you another episode from Voice at the Table, otherwise known as VATT, about culture.
We're gathering together today in this special place to continue our learning journey together. We acknowledge the Woiwurrung and Bunurong people of the Kulin Nations as the traditional custodians of the land and waters of the place where we're recording this, and that sovereignty has not been ceded. We acknowledge and pay respects to the elders, past, present and emerging, and we also pay respect to any First Peoples who are listening.
We remember the self-advocates who work hard, really hard over the years for the right for themselves and for others with a disability to live in the community and to achieve equality and to respect human rights for all. Nothing about us without us.
So what does culture mean? Well, in our top tips, it relates to be prepared. And that's where you make sure that you're ready for the meeting before the meeting. But it's also bigger. It encompasses the whole organisation and all the self-advocates, because I think it's important for everyone to be prepared, regardless of what sort of meeting it is. I'd just like to acknowledge at this stage that this episode is recorded via Zoom, and this is due to the COVID-19 restrictions that are in place in Victoria. Today, I'll be talking with two of our self-advocates, and being Peter Ferguson and Heather Smith, and I'll get them to introduce themselves properly, and we'll start with Peter.
Well, I am Peter Ferguson, past president of Brain Injury Matters. I am a passionate self-advocate where I know that all people should be treated equally and respected. That includes disabled people. Heather?
Hello, my name is Heather Smith, and I'm a committee member and appeal worker with Reinforce, and I'm also a member of Positive Powerful Parents, and I'm actually on a few reference groups as well with the Victorian Legal Aid and the dental hospital. And I'm also a Voice at the Table graduate.
So we'll jump straight in now. And so what does everyone in a meeting need to believe? Now, that sounds a little strange to ask that, but it is rather important, and it revolves around the things of, do all people in the meeting need to be valued, to be seen, and most importantly, to be heard?
I don't think there should be any need for education because it all should be there. But I am not naive, and I know it has to be talked about.
Heather, how do you feel about that?
Yes, I think everyone should be valued, be seen and heard, whether they have a disability or not.
Very true, very true. I'm just wondering, would you have a story from your experiences,
Yes,
highlighting how this happened?
I used to go to these meetings at VCOS, and they were always including me as a member of the reference group. I felt that they were really taking me seriously, and even on the first day they did a session with Voice at the Table before they actually started the reference group. So everyone got to meet each other And I really think that that's a good thing.
It is indeed. It is indeed. Having that initial contact and working out who is very good and really highlights parts of being prepared. And I believe you have a bad story as well, an example of when these things did not happen.
Yes, I did. One time I couldn't join a meeting when I was supposed to because it was on a program called Microsoft Teams. And when I used it once before, it was very, when everyone spoke, it was very blurry, and I just could not understand what everyone was saying. I did ask them about it, and I did mention to them about Zoom, but they actually told me that they can't use Zoom because of their private policy, and that I needed to get my computer updated, but I couldn't do that.
It's a very good example of not doing the right thing and not having an inclusive culture happening within that organisation. Do we need to discuss how, if everyone in the meeting wants it to be a place where everyone is equal, I mean, do we have to actually spell that out for people? Unfortunately, yes. You know,
I think so. I've had some both positive and negative experiences at meetings.
I know that one great example that I've heard about, I unfortunately I wasn't part of it, was the VCOS, the Victorian Council of Social Services.
It was a great meeting because the facilitator really respected everyone. Everyone had their day in the sun. She listened to everybody, and everyone in the meeting was great. It was just a pleasure going to that meeting. I always look forward to it. They had done the work before the meeting to make sure it was good.
So what would this mean to you, Heather, that when everyone is treated as an equal?
Well, whether people attending the meeting have a disability or not, everybody should always be respected, and they should always be listened to no matter what they need to say, and just to make sure there is enough space for everyone to have their say.
You're listening to 3CR, Raising Our Voices. This month, we're joined again by the crew from VATT, Voice at the Table.
Organisations don't always run perfect, inclusive meetings. And I think you may have an example or two there.
I got 2 examples. And one, I was obviously the token person with the ABI. We were interviewing people working with people with an ABI. I was introduced as having an ABI and nothing else. That was my role. My opinion was basically ignored except for the context they wanted them. People all came together after the meeting and I was left on the altar. It was a really the present experience. And the other example, I went to a meeting run by a disability advisory committee group. They were supposed to be up with inclusivity. They treated me like a money grabber, so I screeched that we needed to be paid. They were paying indirectly all the other people who were at the meeting. They were being paid by their own organization to be there. We weren't paid. We were not treated as equal.
So what would this mean to you, Heather, that when everyone is treated as an equal?
Well, whether people attending the meeting have a disability or not, everybody should always be respected, and they should always be listened to no matter what they need to say, and just to make sure there is enough space for everyone to have their say.
So having a say is very important, and having people listen to you is equally as important. There's no point in just saying what you have to say as the expert as a self-advocate with lived experience. It is also important that the people that you're saying it to actually listen to it. And I think you had some good examples of how that could be done.
Yeah. Like one example, they should listen to everybody's lived experiences and not wave people off and say that it's not appropriate to talk about that, because I've actually had that happen to me too many times in my life.
So when going to a meeting, it is important that everyone feels safe within that meeting as well. And that can be extended out to their personal belongings as well, couldn't it, Hannah?
Yeah, when going to a meeting, it is important that everybody's personal things are safe and everybody's personal body is safe, just because of my own personal experience that I had in the past.
When meetings are inclusive, they need to be run in a way that includes everyone. Now, how do you think that would happen? How would an organisation or a committee or a reference group learn how to include everyone?
Probably they would need to do voice at the table training, and they definitely should have disability awareness training around all kinds of disabilities, including intellectual disability.
I think especially around intellectual and cognitive disabilities, because they are the least visible of all the disabilities. It's really hard to tell if someone has something wrong with their brain because you can't see inside their brain. It brings us round to our next point, which is I think it should be happening everywhere. And as Peter said earlier, it should be ingrained. It should be the normal, not the abnormal, not the out of the, we shouldn't be surprised that meetings and organisations have, practices which include equality, respect, listening, shared learning, good communication, and action. Now, why do you think organisations need these things? Well, Like if we're talking about equality, what does that basically mean?
I stick to my former thing, the equality, respect, listening, sharing, good communication. They are attributes that should automatically be part of an organization culture, but all too often it's not. So you have to spell out what equality is separate means.
What do you think it means, Heather?
I think it means using good eye contact and responding to what I have to say, and also just knowing that they're listening to me by not mucking around on their phone or doing other things that might sidetrack them.
And if there are written things within a meeting, what form should they take? I mean, as we know, every meeting has lots and lots of papers. But if they're going to bring a paper to a meeting, a document to a meeting, what do you think? Is that a good thing or not?
I think if they're going to have a lot of written stuff, it needs to be in easy English or plain English, and not in jargon.
Yeah, definitely not in jargon. And we've all been to meetings like that where everyone else is a part of the organisation or council or whatever it may be, and they tend to throw around words that they use every day within the workplace, but no one else does outside of the workplace. So easy or plain English is definitely the way to go. Just wondering, Heather, how often have you received easy English when you haven't asked for it?
With most of the groups, like for example, VATT will have a normal version and an easy English version. But with some meetings I have asked for it, but they haven't done it yet. So I will have a support worker with me, and I have to explain what the document means, or in a way that I understand.
You were telling me before that sometimes you get your support worker to go through an agenda and other documents, and even sometimes that you and your support worker will go to the venue of the meeting a couple of days beforehand.
Yeah,
why would you do that?
They will help me actually look on Google Maps, and they will do a trial run of where to go, and then they would go through the agenda and all the papers to make sure I understand everything. And then if there's any questions for me that I want to ask, they will write down the questions for me. And sometimes they will, most times they will write down in dot points and give me a summary of what has been said in the meeting.
What does respect mean to you, Peter?
what respect involves. So the person I'm talking to really listening to me, active listening, and asking me questions if they don't understand or the final point. If they don't understand what I'm saying because they just don't understand my speech, then they should ask me to repeat it in other words just to make sure they know. And it's so reassuring to have a person obviously listening and asking for. It's not insulting if someone asks me to explain. It shows to me they're really listening and no, they don't understand. So I should put it a different way.
And good communication. I really liked what you were saying there around communication and understanding, and that's very much the essence of these top tips around being able to understand and having tolerance and being able to ask, I didn't quite understand, could you explain that in other words? And I think that's a great way to highlight good communication.
A lot of people, I think, are frightened to ask for other ways to understand something. They are a bit reticent to ask for other way of explaining a point, but they worried about possibly upsetting or causing some or just saying that I for one, and I know that other people with a communication problem don't have any hassle in being asked to repeat themselves or explain in other ways.
Well, it's been a great chat with Heather and Peter regarding being prepared. There's so much more to chat about, so we'll do that in the next episode. So we'll finish up here for now, and we'll be back soon with the continuation of the Being Prepared chat.
Nothing about us without us.
Today we're going to have a chat about Terry Neal. How are you going, sir?
I'm going well, thanks, Warren.
Now, Terry's a very interesting fella. I watched that wonderful video, Terry's Tale.
But the first time I came across Terry was in the 90s. He was at a conference that Reinforce had run in Ross House, and that's the first time I saw him. And he started telling this story that just chilled me to the bones. So the first part was that Terry's mother gave him up as a baby, and he ended up in Tally-Ho Boys Home, and from there he went to Sandhurst, which was another institution, I think mainly for men, or 100% I think for men with an intellectual disability. Then he went to Arrowdale, which is a horrendous, big, white, just what you'd imagine, institution on the top of a hill outside of town near Ararat. He knew he shouldn't be there, so he was full of anger with the way he was treated, and he wouldn't back down. So I think he hit one of the staff, but then they beat him, sedated him, and that's when he ended up in the notorious J ward in Arrowdale, which was the prison for people with aggression. Look, I think he was only 16 or 17 when he ended up there. He was sexually abused there. Then he went back to Arrowdale, and his mum came and took him out. Then she found him what they called a ward. It was made a ward of some guy, where he was quite happy living there. He was sharing a house with him, and then he died, and the police came, and this is the one that does make me quite emotional. And the police woman was there, and he said to her, "You're not taking me back to an institution, are you?" And she went, No, we're going to find you somewhere to live. And then as they were driving, and they turned into Larundel, which was a psychiatric institution out near Bundoora. And he was telling me he just freaked out, tried to open the door and jump out. And so he ended up there, and then eventually ended up at Sunbury. So what you said, Warren, is completely true. He was just someone who was trapped in a system that he couldn't get out of and that he shouldn't have been in. But he was passionate advocate for rights, absolutely passionate. He went on to be a founding member of two really radical groups, one for People for Equality, Non-Institutionalisation, Penny, and the other one's CatPick. Now I've got to try and remember that.
I've got that one written down, actually.
Got that one written down? Yeah.
Coalition Against Forced Treatment and Institutionalised Violence.
So he's very active. He was also a member of Reinforce.
Yep. When did they start? Just sort of
1981.
81. So
they were the first self-advocacy group in Australia. His story is just remarkable.
In the video, Terry talked about the medical model of care. It basically failed him and just locked him away. It seems more like an incarceration than any sort of medical model of treatment.
So in many ways, activism takes many forms. And one of them but even though he was in his mid-20s when he got out, it impacted on the rest of his life in many ways of poverty and you know.
When I opened it up and I stopped and I looked, and the linen room door was already open, and there was pass keys still in the hanging from the door. And I stopped and I looked. I thought, oh, what an opportunity. I thought, here's a go.
Terry talks about his escape from that situation, where one of the jobs he was doing was to collect the dirty linen every day, I believe, and take it round to the linen room.
So I gently put the quilts I had in my hand down on the bed, which was just right near the door, and I had to walk down 2 or 3 steps to the veranda, and then when I got to the door I just slammed the linen room door shut, and I quickly locked it and double locked it over. And
did you lock them in?
Yeah, I locked him in. I thought, every time I've escaped from here I've always gone to Melbourne, down to the city, and I said every time I've been down caught either by the cops, you know, or the screws, you know, the psych nurses. I thought, no, not this time. I'm going the other way.
He never gave in. He was always trying to escape or get out and to keep their key, which was the classic institution key.
Like he would show it to people as he was telling them the stories.
Yeah, it's just such a symbol of the fight that he had in him.
You can find out more, voiceatthetable.com.au.
Welcome to Justin's Joke. If King Kong went to Hong Kong to play ping pong and have a sing-along and died, what would I put on his coffin? A lid.
You've been listening to 3CR, Raising Our Voices, 8:55 a.m. This month, we've heard from Voice at the Table, VATT, about culture. Thanks so much to Warren, Peter and Heather, and Justin. Next up, Radio Capucha.
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast produced in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.